Good evening, members, and good evening and welcome to the members of the public in the gallery. And can I also welcome anyone watching us on YouTube this evening. Welcome to our meeting on the 23rd of August. Gosh, summer's going. But it doesn't feel very summery in here tonight. It's freezing, as usual. Item 1, apologies for absence. I have apologies of absence from Councillor Mrs. Beavers, and she does not have a substitute, and everyone else is here. Item 2, declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest, or non-pecuniary interest relating to items on the agenda, having regard to the Code of Conduct from members? Councillor Swear.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to just declare an MPI, as over time I have been in consultations and with National Grid about this. Also, I've attended various parish councils in my role as Essex County Councillor for the division, but I haven't expressed an interest, and I will stay and vote on the subject.
Thank you. Councillor Mann, I think I saw.
Councillor Steve Poulter, who's speaking later on, Chair, is a former professional colleague of mine and also a former councillor.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to declare an interest? No, Councillor Bolt. You do.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to declare a non-pecuniary interest in the item 22/01147, the substation application. One of the speakers, Councillor Holland, is known to me, and I, like Councillor Schweer, have attended various presentations over the years about this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd also like to declare an MPI. The application is in my ward. The speakers are known to me, as are the other members in the audience. And obviously I have attended many parish council meetings where this has been on the agenda, but I have never given an opinion. And also I have had meetings with National Grid. Anyone else? No. I will stay and vote. Thank you. Item 3, minutes. I have the minutes of the 9th of August. If no one has any objections, is it your wish that I sign them as a true record?
Move them as a correct record.
Thank you. So find a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you. On paperwork. Brings us to item 4, public question time. We have no general questions this evening. Those speaking will speak prior to the application of which they have an interest. That brings us on to item 5, planning applications. The first application, 5A, is application 22002434, land south of the Vineyards, Hatfield, Peveril. This can be found on pages 6 to 23. We have no speakers on this application, so we'll go straight to the presentation, which is going to be made by Peter Lang. Good evening, Peter, and thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and good evening to members. For members' consideration is a proposed agricultural access from public highway B1137 to access agricultural fields to the west of Waycotts. This case is brought before Planning Committee as the agent is related to a planning officer. For your information on the screens here is the location plan sort of indicating in red line border semi where the proposal would be. It feeds off the B1137, which is the main road running through Hatfield Peveril, which leads onto the slip lane onto the A12. To the north of the site is a couple of properties known on the road as the Vineyards. Directly adjacent to the south is the A12 itself, and on the other side of the A12 is Hatfield Peveril itself. The site itself is located outside of a development boundary, but is subject to the Hatfield Peveril neighbourhood plan. The proposed agricultural access would allow movement between the B1137 to fields in the rear. The accessway itself would measure some 70 metres in depth, extending through an identified priority habitat, a traditional orchard, with high-value mature and disease-resistant trees also identified. Given the site is also on a gradient, as well as clearing land for the accessway, unspecified levels of reprofiling would take place to level the slope. And for council members' consideration, here's a bit more of a technical drawing of the scheme. The stated aim of the proposal is to provide access to agricultural land presently only accessible through third-party land. As members may know, this proposal is submitted at a similar time where A12 widening works are being considered, but at present no works have been confirmed and no decisions have been made. On this basis, consultees and officers are determining this scheme based upon the present situation rather than any potential developments down the line. It's worth noting, though, that if planning permission was granted here, this would create a legal access for any future legal access prior to any potential future works. The submitted information indicates that the land made accessible could be brought forward for housing, but of course this would be subject to its own future applications. Independent of this, the land made accessible by the proposal has previously been promoted for residential development and also appears as an alternative site within the Hatfield-Pedville neighbourhood plan. It is important to stress at this point that this application should be considered solely on the current proposal as outlined rather than any future potential schemes. Here are a couple of site photographs from a visit earlier this year. This is the view from Coleman's Bridge. I've circled in red sort of the approximate location of where the crossing would be. Here is the view from the opposite direction looking southwards. And here is a close-up of the public right-of-way, which is in very close proximity to the proposal. As members may notice, there is a bit of a gradient there in the stair, and it's quite a steep climb to go downwards. Given the technical nature of this proposal, particular reference has been made to the consultee comments in this application. To this effect, objections have been received from Essex Highways, National Highways, as well as BDC Ecology and Landscaping. Other objections have been received from the Parish Council, as well as 4 separate neighbour objections. From a highways perspective, their respective consultees have highlighted the lack of technical details about how the scheme could function. Particular reference has been made to the lack of information about the public right-of-way, the gradient change, and the potential structural implications on Coleman's Bridge. BDC Ecology and Landscaping have made reference to the lack of information regarding the impact of the scheme and potential mitigation measures to the identified priority habitats, the high-value trees and wider landscaping impacts. On the basis of these objections, the applicant agreed to allow officers to determine the application without submitting additional information. Refusal is therefore recommended on the following 3 grounds, each of which summarise the consultees' comments in their own respective way. To summarise, the proposed development would consist of an accessway and agricultural crossing, both in proximity to a key highway network and sites of ecological and landscaping value. When considering the potential impacts of the proposal, it is considered that insufficient information has been submitted on each of these counts to demonstrate that the proposal is acceptable in its impacts or policy compliant. Refusal on these grounds is therefore recommended. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you. Members, Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I was just making some notes on what it said on the slides, and it's not exactly helpful when you've got a proposed access in such a sensitive and critical location to see the plans say indicative access route to be confirmed. You know, I think if we're going to determine something like that, we really need to know, and obviously the various statutory bodies need to know exactly where it's going to be. So there's that element of uncertainty. And then my second point is there's numerous statutory objections to this. And thirdly, you know, on this occasion, I'm happy to see that, you know, we're standing up and saying there'll be significant harm to ecology, but even then it's poorly defined. So I think there's very strong grounds for refusal, and I'll move off to recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor. Does that find a seconder before I move on to this, Councillor Mann? Would you wish to speak?
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with all that Councillor Abbott has said. I mean, a theme throughout all the consultative reports is insufficient information. And not only that, but a lack of inclination to provide any more when asked for it. So I think they've come to their own individual conclusions that they haven't got enough to come to an informed decision. Therefore, it's got to be a refusal.
Does anyone else wish to add anything new or further? No. Well, it has been moved and seconded that we refuse this application. All those in favour of refusing the application? That is unanimous. Thank you, members. Thank you, Peter. That now brings us on to application number 5B, which is application number 22011474, land adjacent to Butler's Wood and Waldegrave Wood, west of the A131, in the parishes of Bournemouth and Twinstead, Sudbury Road, Bournemouth, and I do have 3 speakers on this application. The first person wishing to make a statement is Councillor David Holland, who represents the Hennies, Middleton and Twinstead Parish Council. Good evening, Councillor Holland. Can you come to the table and make your statement? I just remind you do have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, councillors. Henny, Middleton and Twinstead Parish Council request that this planning committee refuse permission for the substation. We ask this because we consider both the proposal and the officer report before you to be unacceptably flawed. Here's why. National Grid's visual impact assessment primarily considered static receptors and not dynamic ones, i.e. A131 road users. As a result, the proposed mitigations would be ineffective. Also, a proper cumulative impact assessment is impossible because we don't know whether or not the 132 kilovolt pylon line from the substation to Twinstead T will remain. We also do not know whether National Grid's East Anglia Green proposals will eventually impact this area if a National Grid indicated more direct routing through the Stour Valley is decided upon. But even with these gaps in knowledge, we do know that the amenity impact of the proposal as it stands is unacceptable. The proposed screening is inadequate to obscure the substation from road users. National Grid's proposal for more tree planting on the opposite side of the road indicates that they know this. Road users will in fact pass through the overall site, and the unnatural industrial structures will impact their perception of the area's character. In its response to consultation responses, we see that National Grid is intransigent on all consultee proposals. A scheme to move the substation back from the road and facilitate deeper, effective screening has been rejected on technical grounds. But that scheme is based on an application of technologies that National Grid already advocate for the substation. The real reason appears to be cost-related, as perhaps identified in paragraph 1.5 of the officer's report. And National Grid want the community to bear avoidable amenity detriment to save them money. The officer recommendation is founded on a flawed conclusion in paragraph 1.18. Logically, the statement, overall, it is considered that there would be no detrimental impacts must be erroneous. No development brings no detriment. Paragraph 1.8 implies that residents will have to tolerate reasonable disturbance from sound and thus suffer detriment. Wellbeing detriments are already apparent in the community. Elsewhere, the report acknowledges detriment, including in paragraph 1.6. In our view, the officer's overall conclusion at paragraph 1.18 is founded on flawed case making, which renders the recommendation based upon it unsound. We conclude that National Grid's proposals, as set out in this application, would deliver unacceptable and unnecessary detriment against a background of currently unquantifiable wider cumulative impacts. A better solution is clearly available. On this basis, we believe that refusal of permission for this proposal is the appropriate decision. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you very much, Councillor Holland. The next person wishing to make a statement is Councillor Steve Bolter, and he represents Gestingthorpe Parish Council. Good evening, Councillor Bolter.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Gestingthorpe Parish Council appreciates the need to replace fossil fuel use with low-carbon energy, including low-carbon electricity from the North Sea wind farms, and the urgent need to reinforce the local grid to deliver that low-carbon electricity to the area. However, it did not support the substation being in Study Area C, because it is on high ground, the highest for miles around, in a highly valued landscape area. The PC believes that a change of site now would involve major costs and delay to urgent grid improvements. Hence, its principal aim at the moment is to ensure that sufficient land, finance and planning is allowed to achieve adequate screening of the site, especially where it encroaches into views from residents and rights of way to the west and south of it. To achieve adequate screening as quickly as possible, the PC advocates the use of more mature trees and the early commencement of landscaping as areas become clear. As well as representing its residents, the Parish Council believes it should consider the needs of future generations and of the thousands of people, many from busy urban areas with stressful lives, who use the dense network of tranquil rights of way in the countryside between Gestingthorpe, Wickham, St Paul, Twinstead, Bulmer and the Belshams for exercise or for the therapeutic effect of the landscape. In the 2022 Design and Access Statement uses the Substation Study Area C diagram from National Grid's 2013 consultation. This is appended with the National Grid's Grid 2003 comments on it. Site C was chosen because it is between woodlands acting as mitigation. In 2013, when C2 was chosen, the plan was for a single transformer with connection to the 4,000 kV lines at one pylon. Now the plan is for two transformers, each connected to the 400 kV lines at different pylons. Instead of the substation being well inside the narrow gap between the woods, it spills out into sites C1 and C4. See the diagram, outside it, which were discounted because of their visual impact. These previously discounted sites are unscreened by the woodland when viewed from the south, right round through west to northwest. The PC welcomes the condition on the conditions imposed on the recommended permission, but Condition 12 does not sufficiently address our landscape concerns or requests and suggestions from BDC's landscape consultant. Without details of the contours of the bunds and other land, it is impossible for Gestingthorpe PC or the BDC Planning Committee to assess if the screening will be effective. It is considered that the chosen Site C area, the choice of Site C area is less suitable for the two transformer substation than it was for the original one transformer plan for which it was selected. The PC thus requests the Planning Committee to call for a commitment that Condition 12 is strengthened before approving the application. I might just add on the end of that if in fact the site is moved further back as requested by Twinstead, then the problem of screening the site from the countryside area that is so well used by the public it becomes even more problematic and would require considerably more land purchased to the east of the site, so to the west of the site, to enable to put that extra stuff in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bolter. The final person wishing to make a statement is Mr. John Bevan, and he is the applicant. Good evening, Mr. Bevan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. I'm John Bevan, Senior Project Manager at National Grid Electricity Transmission. We build and maintain the electricity transmission network in England and Wales. With climate change being one of the biggest challenges facing our generation, the UK has set clear ambition to be a leader in clean energy. This application will help meet government targets to deliver 50 gigawatts of offshore wind to the grid by 2030, and also aligns with Braintree's ambitions to take action on climate change following the declaration of climate emergency in 2019. The way we generate and use electricity is changing. More power is coming from offshore wind, interconnectors and nuclear power. The existing electricity network, built in the 60s, does not have the capability to reliably and securely transport all the energy that needs to be connected by 2030. The electricity transmission line running between Bramford Substation in Suffolk and Twisted Tea is a bottleneck in the transmission network and needs reinforcing. We are proposing to build a 400 kilovolt electricity transmission network reinforcement which largely occupies the route of the existing distribution network overhead line owned by United Kingdom Power Networks. As part of this work, we need to build a new grid supply point substation for three main reasons: to maintain the supply of energy to homes and businesses in the local area, to allow us to remove the existing overhead line between Bramford and Twisted Tea, and that in turn allows us to build the new reinforcement. Our plans to develop the GSP have been the result of extensive consultation since 2012. Feedback has helped positively shape the proposals, and the plans have been well considered. For instance, the GSP is located in a position that benefits from the natural screening between Butler's Wood and Waldegrave Wood. It is located where the existing overhead lines are in close proximity. It avoids internationally and nationally designated areas. The design conserves local features of historic, landscape and ecological importance. It provides a safe and suitable access from the Sudbury Road, and the plans will deliver at least 10% biodiversity net gain. As such, our proposals meet three strands of sustainable development set out in the National Planning Policy Framework and accord with the Council's planning policy. To conclude, we welcome the offers of recommendation for approval and urge you to support this. The reinforcement between Bramford and Twisted needs to be in place by autumn 2028. This application will help us deliver this critical reinforcement on time.
Thank you, Mr. Bevan. Well, members, that brings us to the end of people wishing to make a statement on this application, and we'll now go to the presentation, which is going to be made by Juliet. Good evening. Thank you, Juliet.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So this is an application on land adjacent Butler's Wood and Waldegrave Wood for a new 132 kilovolt grid supply point substation, including 2 supergrid transformers, associated buildings, equipment, switchgear, single circuit cable ceiling end compound, a new access, associated landscaping and drainage. So the site measures approximately 7 hectares and is situated between 2 ancient woodlands and local wildlife sites known as Butler's Wood to the north and Waldegrave Wood to the south. The map to the right on the screen that we can see shows its location in proximity to the surrounding villages. Wickham St Paul is to the southwest and Twinstead is to the southeast. The A131 is to the east and there are public rights of way surrounding the site. As members will have seen in the committee report and from the details submitted with the application, the alternative sites for the grid supply points have been explored by the applicant and consulted upon prior to the submission of this application. And the site that we see here with the red outline is the preferred location. This is the constraints plan which has been provided by the applicant in the design and access statement. We can see the site in the centre here in red, and the woodlands and local wildlife sites are shown on either side. And the blue and brown crosses show sort of the proximity of listed buildings. And then we've got the yellow and green dashed lines here, which are the public rights of way, which sort of are on the periphery of the site. The nearest neighbouring property is approximately 325 metres. So this is the existing site plan. It's currently arable land bounded by hedgerows with two pylons passing through the site, and we can see these indicated by these stars on the plan. These are photographs that were taken from within the site. We can see the site is sort of in between Butler's Wood and Waldegrave Wood on either side, and the existing pylons. So this is the submitted block plan. It is proposed that the grid supply substation would be enclosed within a 2.5 metre high security safety fence with a 3.4 metre high electric fence to the rear to secure the site. This is indicated by the dark black line that we can see here. There are 10 modular type buildings proposed for office and welfare facilities and to accommodate electrical equipment. These are predominantly situated to the west of the site, so furthest away from the main road, and there's an access gate here and parking, which includes electric vehicle charging points. Access into the site is proposed off the A131 in this location here, with a field gate proposed at the entrance. There are two supergrid transformers proposed, and a noise enclosure is proposed around each of these to reduce the operational noise. So there's one and there's two. The electrical equipment within the substation would be typically 9 metres high above ground, and there would be a 13 metre high steel landing gantry structure which supports the down leads from the adjacent existing 400 kilovolt overhead power line to the southeast, which is in this area here. Outside of the substation is the 400 kilovolt single circuit ceiling end, which is to the west, and this is proposed as a separately fenced enclosure. And then it's proposed to remove this existing tower here. There are two mounds, bunds, proposed to the east and the west of the site. The mound to the east is 1.5 metres high, and the mound to the west is 2.5 metres high. Planting is proposed on the mounds and adjacent to this area as well to integrate the development into the landscape and provide ecological benefits for biodiversity and net gain. So these are the elevations that have been submitted for the 10 modular buildings proposed. Members may have noted that 2 welfare units are proposed on site. One is proposed for National Grid and one is for UK Power Networks. And these photographs here were provided by the applicant in the design and access statement and are examples of the types of building, modular building, with an example of the welfare facility on the right there. And then here we have the photographs and examples of the gantry, which is here, and the fencing. Your members might just be able to see the electric fencing to the rear of the safety fencing proposed. Those sections of the proposed development have been provided. In this section we can see along the northern boundary of the site, and the green dashed line here, that represents the tree height of the woodland, and then we've got the 2 supergrid transformers at the bottom here. This is the section proposed along the southern boundary of the site. And then this section is actually taken from within the site, looking towards the A131, and it shows the relationship between the existing pylon, Butler's Wood, and Waldegrave Wood. And we can see how the equipment is predominantly screened given the height of the trees within the woodlands adjacent. And this is another section that's been provided from the site, looking towards the A131 again, but set further back to the west of the site. And then this section here is of the single circuit ceiling end, which members may recall was in its own little compound outside of the substation. So these images of the proposal have been extracted from the design and access statement. Although they don't show the overhead lines and pylons at the site, they do give an indication of what the scheme would look like. So at the top we can see the substation proposal, and in this image here on the bottom right is the single circuit ceiling end in its own compound. So on this plan we can see where the access is proposed of the A131. A 5 metre wide road follows the northern boundary of the site to provide access to the supergrid transformers, to the buildings, and also to this compound down here to the southwest. It is proposed that the substation would be unmanned during operation, with approximately one light goods vehicle a month for site maintenance. The Highway Authority haven't raised any objection to the application, subject to conditions. So this photograph was taken from the A131, travelling in a southerly direction. So we can see the site on the right, and the hedgerows and trees on the left-hand side, on the opposite side of the road. And then this photograph was taken from within the site, again looking towards the A131, and we can see the two pylons in that picture. And this photograph is more for context, so it's looking in a westerly direction, away from the site. So in terms of the planning balance, we have assessed the adverse impacts of the proposed development against the public benefits. The proposal would alter the landscape, its character and appearance. However, the proposed bunds and planting would reinforce screening. It has been concluded that there are no significant landscape or visual effects anticipated. Appropriate mitigation is proposed to avoid direct and reduce indirect impacts on protected species, and there will be a localised loss of best and most versatile agricultural land. And then the impact on the trees and hedgerows in the woodlands is limited, given the existing ditch between the woodlands and the field, which provides some protection for the tree roots. In terms of the noise impact, no excessive impact is anticipated on neighbouring amenity. And then looking at the benefits, the proposal would deliver in excess of 10% biodiversity net gain and increase ecological connectivity between the woodlands. It would also will form part of the wider proposal strategy to distribute low carbon electricity in the district and beyond. So there are 22 conditions proposed to be imposed. Some of these are pre-commencement conditions. They include a condition relating to the submission of details for surface water drainage scheme prior to commencement, and long-term maintenance arrangements as well for the surface water drainage system. And also a condition relating to ecological mitigation and enhancement measures. We are proposing a condition relating to the submission of a lighting design scheme to protect biodiversity, and also a condition requiring a landscaping ecological management plan prior to beneficial use. There's also a pre-commencement condition proposed to be imposed regarding arboricultural impact assessment and method statements. With regards to condition 12, I just want to draw members' attention to this. It has changed from that published in the committee report. It was a pre-commencement condition, and that has now changed to prior to any substation equipment being erected above ground. And then we have condition 13 relating to maintenance and irrigation of the planting. We also have conditions to ensure the development adheres to the management and practice measures in the noise assessments, archaeological conditions, and the requirement for a construction traffic management plan prior to commencement. And then finally, the conditions on this screen relate to the construction of site access, the identification of contamination should it be found, hours of operation for deliveries and construction vehicle movements. The recommendation of the application is approval subject to these conditions, noting the amended condition 12. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliet. Members. Councillor Mrs. Parker.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I've spent some considerable time looking at this and looking at all the various plans and documentation. So, first of all, just would like to start off with some questions for Juliet. I'm sorry, it's probably a bit technical, but the first question. I think the major concern for the local parish councils and residents is the appearance, obviously, of this proposal within the landscape, and so the screening is absolutely critical. I understand from the officer's report that the siting of the two transformers and substation has been chosen because of the requirement to have the down leads from, it's the first pylon nearest the road, to come down at right angles to the tower. Can I ask, was any consideration given to moving that tower? Because the other tower is going to be moved. That was my first question. The second question, and that's really picking up a point that Councillor Bolter made, but when this was first proposed back in 2013, it was one transformer, and that's what was being consulted on when we were looking at the alternative sites. And it's now two transformers, obviously double the size. But more importantly, I suppose, is that obviously we've got to have now the ceiling end compound, which has got to come out on the other side from the transformers, and so it's got to extend beyond the wood. So, given the increase in size, is the site boundary still the same site boundary that was chosen for the single transformer, or has there been any consideration to increasing the site boundary to allow for more landscaping? That was my second question. And the third question really is, I think one of the other things that's concerning local residents is the replacement of the smaller local distribution network. So I completely understand that this substation is required to allow that local distribution network pylons all the way from Brantford to Trinstead to be removed, so that instead of having 3 lines of pylons, at least you're going to have two lines of pylons. But in order for that to happen, you have to have a substation to step down the power. I completely understand all that. The thing is that, my understanding is the National Grid, in consultation with UK Power Networks, are only agreeing to remove the pylons, the smaller pylons, up to the Twinsted T, which leaves 4 pylons, I think it's 4, remaining in the landscape doing absolutely nothing. And given that there are obviously a lot of discussions going on between National Grid and UK Power Networks to provide them with the substation that they need, why can we condition that they also arrange for that section of pylons which will be doing absolutely nothing to be removed? So those are my. I wonder if you could answer those 3 questions first, and then I do have some other comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So with regards to the first question and the moving of the site back further from the road, that was a question that we raised with National Grid, and they came back to us and they sort of said, as is sort of detailed in the committee report, it's due to technical and engineering constraints. as to why it's not feasible. It is at the moment 25 metres back from the A131 at its closest point. With regards to question 2, I haven't seen the site plan for the single transformer, so I can't say whether it's the same as what was submitted previously. Don't know whether Chris has any comment to make on that one. No. I should just say, as part of the wider project, I know that National Grid are proposing sort of further landscaping to the west to sort of increase biodiversity net gain, but that's obviously not part of this application and forms part of the wider project. And question 3 was to remove a condition to remove the 4 pylons.
The redundant ones.
Chris, have you got any comments on that one?
Sorry, with respect to question 3, Councillor Parker, I think you're referring to pylons outside of the scope of the application site.
Yeah.
If I'm correct in, yeah. So, in terms of being able to add a condition, so we wouldn't be able to require it because it's beyond the scope of the application site through condition. Had that been offered up as part of the proposal, it could have been potentially skewed in another way, but that, as I understand, is not part of the proposal, and therefore that wouldn't be something that we would be able to condition. In respect of question 2, question 1, we might just need to come back, I think, to your specific point, Councillor Parker, which was, if I understand correctly, the tower closest to the road was consideration given to the demolition of that tower. So perhaps if I could just ask Juliet to come back on that point, if that's okay.
Rebuild it, wasn't it?
I'm not sure.
It was to move it rather than demolish it. Move it.
Yeah. So, Councillor Parker, if I understood correctly, your point is, and this has come back to the point about the buffer and the landscape screening, that given the position of the tower at the moment, if that was moved further over to the left, for want of a better expression, it would allow more space at the front of the site for screening. So that's your question.
Yeah, that's correct, Chris.
So is this tower here we're talking about on the screen?
Sorry, I can't see you.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
The road. Yeah.
Again, as I say, that was the where we asked them if they could look at moving it back from the site, and they came back and said it was for technical and engineering reasons that wasn't feasible to do that.
No, because they'd have to move the whole thing back.
Okay. Madam Chair, may I carry
Yes,
on?
carry on.
I mean, I'm sorry, but they are moving the other tower so that you connect to the ceiling end compound, and they are creating a temporary a diversion of the power lines to enable that to happen. I don't see why it's technically not possible to effectively take down its tower 80 and move it 25 metres, 50 metres back. Obviously, it's going to be additional cost, but it'd be perfectly. I don't see why, from a technical point of view, why it's not possible to do that. I understand that the down leads must come down I mean, I'm not challenging that at all. That they must come down at the angle that the National Grid say they must come down. But I think this business about the screening east and west of the site is key. It is in a very beautiful part of our district. Admittedly, it hasn't got any official designations, but I think anybody who lives there realises it's what a lovely bit of countryside it is. And I mean, the fact that National Grid are proposing to put screening on the other side of the road indicates that there is a problem, and that there is insufficient land there in the present location of those 2 transformers to allow that buffer to take place. I still don't understand why the whole thing can't be shunted west. There's plenty of space there. It would involve, however, taking that tower down, replacing it. So at the moment, that is a big problem for me. I'll leave it there, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Swear.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Very much following on from Councillor Parker's comments. I mean, it's very obvious from the speakers who have come forward to us tonight that there is concern amongst our residents and communities. And it's not a small concern. It's absolutely huge. It's massive. If you look at social media and absolutely everywhere, everybody is saying that this is going to be a change that is going to affect not only the local residents and the community, but it's also going to potentially affect everybody with regards to their view, the public rights of way, and also for the passing traffic all of the time. And there just is not enough and adequate screening between that A131 and what is proposed by National Grid. Not commenting about the renewable energy, the power and the need, but this is a once-off build. And I think we need to accommodate the local feelings very strongly on this, and we should ask National Grid to take down that tower so that the whole site can be shunted further west between the two woods in order that National Grid can then not only increase biodiversity by a measly 10%, but significantly, because you're taking out also some of the prime agricultural land in this area, and it's going to be a visual and viewpoint for a lot of people around there. And it's hugely important, and I don't know how many of my colleagues here tonight are familiar with this area, but I cannot state in the strongest possible terms how important this application is. And we need to think of the long-term effect it's going to have on our residents and communities. And I do believe that from a technical and engineering point of view, it is feasible that National Grid could move that tower to accommodate this in order to help, because at the moment we need to do an awful lot to mitigate the community and the residents and businesses around this, because it is so important. And of course, every single moment of every single day, there's a vast amount of traffic also going past there, which will be able to see that wood and the site with the current landscape proposals. There will be noise and warmth coming away from it, and I think we do need to see National Grid accommodate better landscaping all round from the west and the east to mitigate the long-term impact this is going to have on those communities. It's hugely important. It's one-off, and of course, the whole of the country is going to benefit, and I believe that National Grid have got the finance and the engineering and technical ability to accommodate this to the benefits of the people in this lovely part of North Essex, and it needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sria. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Before I say any more, could I ask a couple of questions, please, of Juliet? Firstly, given our newly adopted local plan and the wording was the page number on 206 about external lighting being absolutely critical near local wildlife sites, why did the council not require a detailed lighting design at verification stage? Second question, could you say a bit more, please, about the access onto the A131, the visibility display, and how that might affect any hedges and trees along it? Thank you.
Thank you. So the applicants did provide some detail on the external lighting in the environmental appraisal, but there were no drawings provided with it. So we did go back to them and explain that that would need to be a condition for us to be able to fully assess it, and also consult with our colleagues in ecology and landscape. In terms of the visibility displays for the A131, that will require removal of a hedgerow to facilitate that, and I also believe to get the equipment in as well. And the supergrid transformers are quite large structures, so it will require removal of hedgerow.
So is that quantified? Do we have any drawings?
I believe it's 30 metres or so.
Right, but we're talking about biodiversity net gain, so we haven't actually quantified the loss of trees and hedges along the front hedge there, have we? So have we done that? Have we done that? Because if we haven't, how do we calculate the biodiversity change?
The applicants are proposing to replace the hedgerow there, which is shown on the drawing, and also additionally on the bunds as well, which are proposed to be planted up and around the bunds.
Well, it's not clear to me that that's fully enumerated in the biodiversity gain claims. Anyway, speaking to the item, obviously I agree with the need to act on climate change, but we need to do it in a way where we're not adding to some of the problems we've already got. And obviously I can't resist the opportunity to mention that National Grid's other proposals, which this Council has discussed recently, have raised a lot of concerns about the impact it's going to have on the countryside instead of alternatives. This is a very large site. It's 7 hectares. It is an incredibly sensitive site. It's between 2 local wildlife sites, which are also ancient woodlands. We've got significant objection from the parish councils. We're going to lose best and most versatile agricultural land. I noticed on page 29 it says, well, we've got a lot of it in the district. Yeah, but we're getting less and less of it all the time. And each time we lose a bit, the proportion changes, doesn't it? Because it's a fraction of a smaller number. I don't know how much best quality agricultural land we lost in the district in the last 10 years to all sorts of types of development, but it must be stacking up very significantly now. Clearly, the landscape impacts are, I think, the key issue here, and I don't think we've heard tonight. I mean, I saw there's a revised condition 12, but the revised condition 12 I don't think met what the parish councils were asking for. Some heads agreeing with me there. So, in actual fact, what the revised condition 12 seems to do is give the developers more time to start on site without actually putting in the details we need to see. So I don't think we've done enough there. But I want to come back to the issue of lighting because I really think this is extraordinary. For about half the year, it's night. And in a location like this, a sensitive rural location in the north of the district, what this looks like at night will be as important as what it looks like during the day. And this is what it says in our newly adopted local plan for a policy which isn't even quoted in the report, extraordinarily. LPP 77. The text at the start says, lighting proposals that neighbour or are close enough to significantly affect areas of nature conservation, which include local wildlife sites, will only be permitted in exceptional circumstances. And yet we did not require, as a council, a detailed lighting assessment before this application came to committee. External artificial lighting can have severe implications for the natural diurnal rhythms of a range of animals and plants. Therefore, sites which are deemed important in terms of their suitability for wildlife must not be negatively affected in any way by artificial lighting. And then it goes on to LPP 77, which I say isn't even referenced in the report, which is our main planning policy on lighting. What I've seen that the developers have put in is some extraordinarily vague stuff and also actually quite comical. I'll just refer to it. Apparently, when they're putting this thing up, they're going to use mobile solar lighting towers. Well, that's going to work well in January. I mean, I'm a big fan of solar power, but how are you going to power industrial scale construction towers through solar power? I mean, it's just absolute nonsense. And it says that post-construction lighting will be security lighting. Well, you don't need security lighting. CCTV can run off infrared. And if you don't have white light, you deny the opportunity to criminals to see what they're doing. Their use would require triggers, timers, low lux level lighting. I doubt very much whether National Grid will be using low lux lighting on a site that's this big. There'll be white LED floodlights and bulkhead lights. That's what they always use. So I think this is a major concern, and I think the council's really missed this. This is just about a sensitive site you could get in the countryside. I know I bang on about this issue, but this really is top of the range, and yet we don't have any secure lighting details that which we can decide whether or not this is acceptable. So I think there's very significant issues on landscape impacts both day and night. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. I agree with you entirely. I mean, the lighting doesn't just affect wildlife in that part of the world, it will affect us humans in that part of the world because it's as dark as can be and it is a dark sky area. And it will actually show for miles. I have been out to Castle, Hedingham Castle, and you can actually, from that, see the site across the fields. Chris, you wanted to come back.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So just to clarify the point on the external lighting, so the requirement for planning applications when they're submitted is the applicant has to comply with national and local requirements. So, Councillor Abbott, you'll be aware that this application obviously has been submitted prior to the adoption of the new local plan. So, the Council is currently in the process of now updating our validation checklist for local requirements, so that will then bring our local list of requirements in accordance with the local plan, but obviously there is a time period for that to be completed. So in terms of compliance and requiring certain information up front to a certain standard, that will follow, but obviously you'll need to appreciate that certain applications that are already effectively in the planning process, we can't unvalidate the application and then effectively require further information. This is clearly something which is being considered by reason of the condition that's recommended. And the only other comment that I'd make on this, obviously, the detailed standard lighting condition. I think the key thing with a facility of this type of nature, there needs to be some form of lighting on the site. If you're accepting of the facility in this location, there would need to be, for security, operational reasons, there will need to be a level of lighting, and it's a question then of the design of the lighting, the specification, how it's sited, and I would suggest that that can be appropriately covered by condition. But I take the point that you haven't got the details before you, which is a separate matter, but I did just want to clarify the point about the validation checklist, because we can't retrospectively, for applications that are already in the process, go back and require that information in accordance with new requirements that have come forward within the newly adopted local plan. But that will be something that, once the local validation list is refreshed, that will be something which will be addressed and covered and will come before this planning committee.
Councillor, I'll let you come back.
Thank you very much. Well, I don't know, I can't recall exactly what the local validation list says, so you might well be right on that. However, I'm right on the fact that we've just adopted the local plan, and that policy is our primary development control policy for this issue, and it's not quoted in the report. LPP 77, and the associated text is clearly absolutely relevant to this application. Now, the reason I'm harping on about this is that it doesn't matter sometimes that we have a condition. I have seen site after site, I'm not going to quote them all now, but I can do if you want, reel them off, where it's been, we've put in a very nice looking condition. Essex County Council has done the same. And what goes up, there's no relationship to what we as councillors might want to see on that site. Because then it's left to officers and technical, the lighting engineers to decide what it is. And they will put up white LEDs. That's what they always do these days. So we should have had detail in front of us. National Grid should have done their job properly. The applicant should have done their job properly to have detail in front of us on the type of biodiversity sensitive, and as Madam Chairman quite rightly says, human impacts, night-sky impacts, of course. And by the way, all three of those are in the National Planning Policy Framework.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mann.
Can we have an officer comment on further strengthening condition 12? Is there scope, as the parasites are suggesting and asking, for beefing up the screening, for example, the use of more mature trees?
Thank you, Councillor Mann. So the condition at the moment is just the generic landscaping condition in requiring details of species. So that would be something at the moment, as it's worded, that those details would come forward pursuant to any other discharge of condition application. So the condition wording could obviously be changed and altered, and yes, there could be the requirement to put in more mature specimens potentially. I suppose there's a difference between bolstering the condition and the other wider points that have been raised in respect of landscape impact and the views that have been expressed that actually needs to be a more significant buffer. The more significant buffer couldn't be achieved without actually relocating and resiting the operational form of the development. But in terms of where the landscaping is indicated as proposed, potentially that could be bolstered as suggested. So that we could look at some alternative wording for condition 12, but that doesn't, I think, address all of the concerns that have been raised in respect to the siting of the actual the operational development on the site. Hopefully that's some help.
Yeah, I mean, I note the guessing thought view, for example, that this is a given, but we've got to look for sort of greater sort of mitigation than is provided. I'm uncertain as to the technical and engineering implications of moving the site back, but the applicant is suggesting that is not possible. So if it is static, it's not a dynamic, not something we can look at, then we've got to concentrate on screening what is going to be there. I mean, reading the reports, I mean, they've investigated, was it eight alternative locations? I think I read, and this is the least worst, and that is a way I think of possibly looking at it. This is something that is necessary, possibly not avoidable. It's got to go, somewhere in that area, and this is the least obnoxious option. It's not to say it can't be improved upon, but it looks, very much to me, if this is going to happen within this area, which is, by all intents and purposes, vital to the overall scheme, then it's got to be here.
Actually, Councillor, I think it's probably the cheapest because it's a direct line from the Twinsted T, and then the new 400s are coming over from. We've got another set coming. I mean, this doesn't come to our planning committee, but we've got them coming from Bramford to the Twinsted T across the countryside, and from the Twinsted T to this site is a direct line. Probably the cheapest, in my opinion, but no, I've had my say.
Perhaps, Madam Chairman, that's a happy accident.
Well, we're at a standstill now. Did you want to ask anything else?
Let's make a comment, Madam Chair. I mean, my understanding from a technical point of view about the positioning of the substation from reading the document, the planning, the agenda, and the design and access statement was that the key thing is that the lines must come down at a right angle from the tower, and that is why the substation is being positioned where it is. If you were to move the tower, you could move the substation, because the line would still come down at a right angle. So I don't think it's a complicated issue. That is the reason given in the report as to why the substation has been positioned where it is, because the lines must come down at a right angle to the tower. Presumably, if you were to move the tower, you could also move the substation and get around that technical problem. I still have a concern that there is insufficient landscaping, insufficient room to create sufficient landscaping. I don't know how successful planting oak trees on bunds is. Maybe birch trees might survive, and Councillor Roberts is probably a bit more expert on this than I am, but I think with more room you could have better landscaping. I don't deny that, as Councillor Mann has said, that this is probably the least worst option in terms of the alternatives that were chosen, but I just think could do better with the landscaping. And actually, well, I will actually, no, Councillor Ritchie, do you want to, did you, sorry, Madam Chairman, otherwise I was going to move something, but
Councillor Ritchie, I'm sorry, I missed you. Yes, Albert.
No, I was just going to say, having listened to a number of issues that have come to light tonight, and the presentation from Juliet, would the specifically the discussion around the moving of the tower, would that fall into the kind of category D, deferred consideration of the application for a specified reason until we have either a independent view on whether or not that can be achieved, or whether National Grid want to partner up with someone to give us a more technical view on whether or not that can be achieved, as it would seem that I think if there is some leeway that can be sought to move that tower more to the east, then it would likely jump the hurdle of being approved at planning committee. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Would you like to come back?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Just on that point, unless Juliet has any further technical justification that we can explain this evening, I don't think we can offer anything up further as officers on that point, other than the explanation has been given. So, should members be minded, obviously the application could be deferred this evening. We could then go back with some of the comments that have been raised this evening, specifically on that point, to establish technical grounds. I mean, I'm not sure whether or not that has wider implications in terms of the length to the next tower and so forth. So, but we could pick that conversation up with National Grid on that point, and then refer the application back once we've got clarity on that point. So,
thank you, Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Chris, for clarification on that. I think, given that we are almost at the juncture where I don't think we're going to make progress this evening, I'd be minded to defer this evening's application, specifically on that technical question, in the hope that we receive a technical note or some technical advice back, hopefully in the not too distant future. So I would be minded to defer on this item for now.
This is for the moving of the tower. Also, would you be prepared to ask for a proper lighting condition, lighting plan
so
at the same
if we're taking
time?
the opportunity to defer, then
Yes.
I think we should look at
deferring
a
it.
number of questions brought up tonight, one from Councillor Abbott, and also some additional landscaping to give an additional buffer too.
So really, we want the three things: the knowledge, the information as to whether the tower could be removed. We want a proper lighting plan, assessment, and biodiversity. So, you're seconding that?
I'll second on that basis. Yeah.
You've got all that down, Chris? With that, moving for deferral for those three reasons, all those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you, members. Thank you very much indeed. So that application...
Could I suggest, Chairman, that we give officers leeway to add in anything else that was caught up in the discussion?
Yes, quite useful.
That
yes.
might be useful.
I think they found that realised our feelings, and I think they realised the feelings of when they've heard them this evening. Thank you very much for attending, everyone. I have no other business, so I would close the meeting at 8:20. That's clock slow, to 8:25. Thank you. Thank you, officers, and thank you, Alison.